Welcome to another edition of Jazz Smack, where tonight we are going to talk about how the Utah Jazz players compare in plus minus this year with this past year. So this doesn't apply to all the players because all the players on the Jazz right now weren't on the team last year, but we're going to compare the players that were on the team last year to how they're doing this year. So let's talk about that.
Jazz Smack, NBA and Utah Jazz basketball.
So before we take a look at the numbers, let's just talk about the most recent couple of games and what we saw, and then look at all the numbers. But the Jazz just got done playing the Lakers this evening, and there were a lot of points scored. Keyonte again scored a ton of points in this game. There were a ton of fouls called, 60 fouls called in this game, which is just an obscene number of fouls. But one of the questions is, Keyonte has put up 30 plus now in 3 games in a row. Do you, as the fan base, believe that Keyonte is going to consistently put up these type of numbers for the remainder of this season, providing that the rules don't change? And quite frankly, I don't expect the rules to change at this point. I think Keyonte is going to continue to shoot a lot of free throws, and he's going to continue to score a lot of points. You know, he's not going to score 30 plus every game, but quite frankly, I wouldn't be surprised if he's closer to Lowry. The way things are going, the way that the game is being officiated, I wouldn't be surprised if he's closer to Lowry as the season progresses in terms of points scored. You know, that just seems like the trend to me. And I don't know if it's good or bad for the Jazz, but it's certainly good for Keyonte and his perceived worth around the league. I don't think it's good for basketball the way it's being officiated right now. And I'm not convinced it's good for the Jazz either, but it's certainly good for Keyonte.
I think that it will change. I guess I have a different view on that, and I will just give you some stats before you get into the stats. I brought these up the other day, but I was looking at this before we came on the podcast. Is the average number of free throws shot per game this year is 24.8. Last year it was 21.7. The year before it was 21.7. The year before that it was 23.5. Then the year before that, 21.9, then 21.8. The reason I'm pointing that out is that the season, which was 22-23, that it was 23.5, partway through that season, they changed how fouls were being called. You know, I think it was that season that they just changed the rules. And ultimately, because I remember Colin in particular, that he was getting a lot of fouls called on him. He's getting the free throw line a lot, and they just changed it. They stopped calling those fouls. And so my guess is, there's a lot of chatter about this right now. I think that they will change it. And now, who would it affect in the game that played tonight? Luka, number one, right? I mean, Luka had some just phantom calls where you're just like, what the heck was that? Like, he would be like driving in from the free throw line, put it up, and LeBron and Keyonte. Those are the 3 that it would affect the most. And I think it will happen this year. If it doesn't happen, I think he's going to continue to score a ton of points, right? I mean, one, he's getting the free throw line a ton like he did tonight. And the last 3 to 4 or 5 games, he's been highly efficient. Let's face it. We've been critical of Keyonte, but efficiency on offense, he has been the last 4 to 5 games. I mean, he's hitting his threes, he's hitting his free throw lines, and he's shooting a good percentage from twos. And so if he's on that trend and they continue to call the foul shots like they are, I think he will score that. Will he score 30? No. It takes a really, really special player in the NBA to score 30 points a game. I don't think that's going to be Keyonte, but it wouldn't shock me if he's 26 or 27, right? And like you said, like the range of Lowry.
I think that gap between Lowry and Keyonte just continues to shrink. if it continues like this. I mean, I don't even see any plausible way that it doesn't, because Keyonte's playing a ton of minutes. He's playing the most on the team. I mean, he played 39 tonight, and Will Hardy is not going to stop playing Keyonte. That's clear as day. That's his guy. That's his favorite guy. Other than Lowry on the team, that's his guy. So he's going to continue to get a ton of minutes.
No, it's more so than Lowry. I think it's more so than Lowry.
And he's going to score a lot of points. I mean, he's going to be the primary focus of the offense. When the going got tough tonight and they tried to get back in it, Keyonte was it was his number that was called. And so he's going to just continue to rack up points, because the Jazz are a sieve on the defensive end. So there's going to be a lot of possessions in all the Jazz games, and that's going to favor Keyonte too. So, the lack of defense and the way the league is being officiated and the way the Jazz play, all those things favor Keyonte scoring a boatload of points.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we've said this many times, and it's not only us that are saying this. The Jazz don't play defense. They're not trained to play defense. There's no accountability on defense. There's no emphasis on defense. It doesn't matter if you play defense or not. If you're the offensive player that Will Hardy likes, you will play. There is zero accountability now, because if you look at the net ratings, and you're going to get in the plus minus, I looked at the net ratings, and we could talk about that if we have time. If you look at the last 5 games, the last 10 games, the last 15 games, there isn't a big difference in net ratings of players. Like, you think, okay, this player's been playing well. No, there's not a big difference, because the players that are playing well offensively, defensively, they're terrible, right, on the Jazz. And so the net rating doesn't really change, because there's zero accountability on defense for the Utah Jazz. So, you and I are aligned here. I think his numbers are going to stay consistent. I hope he continues to shoot the ball like he did, because honestly, he's shooting the ball fantastic. I mean, his three, he is highly confident. Not that Keyonte ever had a confidence problem, but he is highly confident right now. Every time he puts up the ball, he thinks it's going in. He had a couple of shots like the one against LeBron tonight. Fantastic, right? I mean, LeBron is 5 inches taller than him, 6 inches taller than him. He shot it right over him and knocked it down. I mean, it was a fantastic shot.
Well, let's take a look at those numbers from last season and this season. In a previous podcast, we looked at the plus minus numbers both on court and off court per 36 minutes from this season. Now let's look at those compared to last season in a full season, the 24-25 numbers for the players who were on the team. So here's the premise. How do individual Utah Jazz players compare in plus minus? Overall, for the 24-25 season, the Utah Jazz team finished a negative 9.3 points per game. So, on the court, we looked at those numbers last podcast. So now we're going to take a look at the 24-25, and let's take a look at the players. So, Lauri Markkanen was the best on the team last season in on-court per 36 minutes. And what we're trying to do is the lower the negative number here, because all the Jazz players were negative, because as a team they were negative 9.2, and so all the players from last season did end up negative, but the lower the negative number, meaning the closer to 0, the better it is for this group of numbers. So Lauri Markkanen last year was a negative 4.5, compared to Lauri Markkanen this year is a negative 3.2. Last year's Svi was a negative 5. This year's Svi so far, up to, not including tonight's game against the Lakers, he's a negative 3.1. Bryce Sensabaugh, a negative 7.2 last season. Bryce Sensabaugh so far this year, a negative 11.2. Isaiah Collier, a negative 7.9 last year. So far this year, Isaiah Collier, negative 15.3. Kyle Filipowski, last year, a negative 8.7. Kyle Filipowski so far this year, a negative 2.5. Keyonte George last season, a negative 8.7. This season, so far, a negative 7.9. Cody Williams, last year, negative 12. This year, in very limited time, a negative 5.3. So there we can compare and contrast the numbers from this season compared to last season. And the ones that jump out a lot to me, Lowry is very consistent. Last season to this season, about the same. Svi is fairly consistent. Last season to this season, not a ton of difference. Bryce is having a tough year to start the season. Isaiah Collier's having a really tough year to start the season. I mean, last year, for much of the season, he was a starter. He's now coming off the bench. I don't think that's helped him. Kyle Filipowski is the one that jumps out to me the most. Kyle Filipowski, I mean, that's a huge step up from where he was last year, a negative 8.7 last season, and then stepping up to, so far this season, a negative 2.5. That's a huge jump. Keyonte so far is roughly the same. His number is almost identical. And then Cody is really struggling yet again. So it's really the one that jumps out to me in terms of great is Kyle Filipowski, and the one that jumps out to me in terms of, wow, this has taken a negative turn, is Isaiah. So those are the two that jump out to me looking at this set of numbers.
I agree with that. You probably said this to start with, but what's the negative plus minus this year versus last? Is it roughly the same this year versus last overall for the team?
It's a bit better so far this year.
Okay.
The last time I looked at it, it was negative 7 point something.
Okay, so we would expect, if all the players trended, that they'd be slightly better this year. So Keyonte, I think, would be a good example. Keyonte last year was negative 8.7. He's negative 7.9. So if he just improved relative in the same percentage of the team, that's maybe roughly what he would be. So I think you said Svi slightly went up. Lowry slightly went up. That would be consistent with the team being slightly better this year than last year, right? So going, the one that really jumps out, as you said, is Kyle, and we've talked about it multiple times. He's not getting a ton of praise, honestly, with a lot of analysts and a lot of the Jazz announcers. He's not getting a lot of praise, but he consistently is coming up in these stats, is showing to be a much better basketball player than he was last year. And then Isaiah, as you said, has taken a turn for the worse. The one guy on this team that really looks much worse is Isaiah in the numbers.
So let's now look at the off-court per 36 minutes numbers compared to last season. So let's start out, and these numbers, the closer you get to zero, the worse it looks for the player. That means that the team plays actually better without you. So here are off court per 36 minutes, and Keyonte George is number one, as he was last year on the Jazz. Last year he was a negative 4.9, and this year he's a negative 2.1. Cody Williams, negative 5.3. Cody Williams this season, negative 6.2. Last season, Kyle Filipowski, negative 5.9. This season, Kyle Filipowski, a negative 8.9. Last season, Isaiah Collier, negative 6.2. This season, Isaiah Collier, a negative 2.6. Bryce Sensabaugh, negative 6.8 last season. Bryce Sensabaugh this season, a negative 3.8. Svi, a negative 7.4 last season. This season, a negative 9.6. And Lowry Marketing, a negative 8.4 last season, and Lowry this season, a negative 12.6. So the numbers at the bottom, Lowry is clearly the most valuable player on the team according to these numbers, and Lowry is even more valuable this season than he was last season, according to these numbers. I mean, his number here is, his jumped 50% over where it was last season. Keyonte again is, and this is a trouble sign, is Keyonte again is, he is, in terms of where he is compared to all the other players on the team, he is again, his numbers are the worst of the players. And that's alarming. Kyle Filipowski again is having another really good number here. I mean, his number increased by 3. That's really nice. But it's more of the same. I mean, obviously these numbers are related to those previous set of numbers we look at. But the one that really jumps out to me is Kyle.
I agree. And when we're putting these numbers up there, here, I want to emphasize something. We're not going and trying to find numbers to prove a thesis. What we're trying to do is look at the numbers realistically and relative to how players are performing. I hear a lot of commentary, like we're all fans at the end of the day. We listen to other podcasters, we listen to the things, and what we see is a slice of stats to best make a case for the player you want to promote. The reality is there's been players been on great trends and bad trends recently and may have good shooting numbers or bad shooting numbers. You have to look at the total picture, though. You have to look at defensive rating, offensive rating, plus, minus, etc. And we're not trying to manipulate the statistics. We're giving you the statistics as they actually are. And the one guy that's really stood out this year in playing better is Kyle. Out of all the players, he's the one guy that's actually really standing out and playing. He's not getting a lot of press. We're not trying to emphasize and promote Kyle. We're pointing out what the stats actually show here. And the alarming part, which you say about some other players, is some players are getting a lot of accolades. Honestly, Isaiah had this great, shot today where he bowled somebody over. His numbers haven't been good this year. I like Isaiah. You like Isaiah. But the reality is his numbers have not looked good this year. So you have to look beyond kind of like shooting stats and how many you're scoring, et cetera. You got to look at some of these advanced statistics, and it kind of paints a different picture than I think what we're being kind of force-fed by the press of what's actually happening, on the court and which players are performing and which players are not.
Well, we're not trying to, like we said with the last set of numbers that we did on the last podcast, we're not trying to disparage any players or anything like that here. That's not the goal of this. We want the Utah Jazz to succeed. That's the goal. That's really the only goal. We want to see the Utah Jazz succeed. So these numbers do paint somewhat of a picture. They don't paint the entire picture because, people are playing with different players, and it's kind of a set rotation a lot of the time for some of these players to play with other players, and that can affect your plus and minus. So there are a lot of factors that go into this, but really all we can do is look at the raw data and then try and gain some sort of insight into what's taking place on the court and how the Utah Jazz are performing as a whole and individually. So that's the goal of this. So those are the numbers that we are going to look at tonight in terms of the plus minus. And, it's interesting to say the least. It doesn't paint the entire picture for sure, but it is interesting to see, the compare and contrast of the two seasons so far.
Yeah, and before we go off of that on your next point, which is going to be a really interesting one to talk about, you and I have had these discussions, and I think it's worth bringing up and talking about, is that if you look at field goal percentage for a player and that player's field goal percentage goes up, you have to look at why. You could say, okay, it could be shot selection. It could be you're shooting more efficiently. It could be that you're not getting credit for field goal attempts because you're getting fouled, and then that doesn't count as a field goal attempt. And so some of the things that I think we have to look at over the year is that if the free throws are up three free throws a game this year, which they are, that's what the stats show. If that goes away, then that means the players that are getting those free throws, and in this game it's Doncic, LeBron, and Keyonte, and Lowry if he were playing, the players that are getting those free throws then get a miss, and that hits their field goal percentage. So we have seen some escalation in field goal percentages here. Is that due to a combination of shot selection, getting to the free throw line, et cetera? So we could see that change if the free throws go down, right? If they stop calling the free throws, they're going to get missed field goal attempts, which is going to cause the field goal percentage to go down.
If they do change the way that it's being officiated, and from my standpoint, for the good of basketball, they must change this. You can't just doing what these players do, just go. You're going on one trajectory, going somewhat towards the basket, and then all of a sudden you change your trajectory and lean into somebody, and then pretend like you're shot by a cannon, going in some other direction. And Keyonte does this all the time. Luka does this all the time. Harden does this all the time. This isn't good for basketball. Yes, we want the Utah Jazz to succeed, but we also want to be entertained while we're watching the Utah Jazz. I mean, quite frankly, the NBA is suffering. It's suffered in recent years in audience, and the way it's being played right now, and the way it's being officiated, this isn't the way to gain audience. So Adam Silver needs to address this. He needs to address this, and he needs to fix it. Now, Keyonte and these other players can adapt to a new set of rules. Yeah, Keontae's not going to be as effective. He's not going to just run in there and shoot 10 free throws a game. Yeah, he shot 3 technical free throws tonight, I think. So that is an extra 3 free throws that he did take. But overall, this really isn't good for basketball. It's not good for the game as a whole, and that is another problem that I think we want to address. And I think all the fans should be addressing this, and all the fans, there should be an outcry and try and put pressure on the league to actually fix this, because this is another one of those problems that needs to be fixed.
Yeah, the worst offender, it was Luka. It wasn't Keyonte either. It was Luka. Yeah. I mean, the fouls that guy gets called. I mean, you just how do you guard Luka? If you're going to allow him, I give the Jazz, whoever was working with Keyonte this summer, I give the guy credit. He looked at the rule book and he said, look, if you go in a straight line and you just throw your hands up, you'll get a foul called. And that's what we're consistently seeing. And Luka's trainer figured it out. Harden's trainer figured it out. So now you got guys that they just take a straight path to the basket and basically go up. And if the ball falls out of their hand or they bump into somebody, a foul's called. That's, like you said, that's really tough basketball. Like, how do you guard that person? That's not what you want to do, is see a free throw in that case, right? And Luka is the biggest beneficiary of it. Well, Luka, you're critical of Shea, and honestly, to me, Shea has a lot of pump fakes, etc., that he quasi gets fouled on. To me, that's different than these straight line drives where you just throw up your hands and okay, that's a foul. Like, what? Right? So anyhow, let's go on to your next point.
Well, I think that's the extent of my points for this evening, actually. So I believe that Keyonte is going to have a lot of more 30-point games this season. I think that unless the rules change, that's going to be the trend for this year. And I am not convinced that Adam Silver is going to change the rules. They will change come the playoffs. We can guarantee that. And this is one of those things where the Jazz, yes, Luka got a lot of these calls in previous playoff runs. He has received those. But are we convinced that Keyonte is going to shoot 10 plus free throws, in a playoff situation? I'm not convinced of that. I would have to see it to believe it. So I do believe that the rules will tighten up in terms of the number of free throws and the fouls called and everything. It's going to be a lot more physical game come playoff time, like it was last season. That's what I believe.
Yeah, I just hope it happens in the regular season, that it changes too. And I agree. I don't have a ton of confidence that Adam Silver is going to change things, because you and I have been the biggest harper on the tanking. And even though you and I, we're trying not to talk about tanking, but we know The game is you've got to get a high draft pick. You've got to have higher odds of a high draft pick, and that means tanking. And Silver is not doing anything about that. And what we want is to change the rules, and we're not telling you how to change the rules. We want the rules changed that you're not incentivized to lose basketball games. That's not good for the sport. It's not good for us as fans. And Silver has not done anything about that, right? I mean, like zero. So do I think he's going to change the foul issue? No, I don't. To me, the tanking is number one issue to solve. And don't encourage teams to tank because it's better for the game. And then two, fix this foul thing. And then all the other stuff too. But notwithstanding that, I do think the ratings are up this year. And, my theory on why the ratings are up without any sort of analysis on it, I think moving the games to different platforms has really helped. Because you and I now, we get it on Paramount Plus, we get it on Amazon, right? I think that's really helped in opening up the audience to getting it to different people, that more people can watch the games, on services that they have. So that's my theory of why the viewership is up. Not necessarily like better games, but because of that.
Very possibly, yeah. I mean, I haven't looked at the ratings. They're still not killing it. I don't know what the ratings are, but I know they're still not killing it. I mean, it's still, compared to the way it was in the mid '90s or something like that, we're still like a fraction of that. Of course, there's a much larger overseas audience now. I mean, NBA is the number one sport in China, so there's a ton of viewership there, and so around the world the game is doing well. Here in the States, it's not doing as well as it was, in previous decades. So I think that. Do you have anything else for tonight, or I mean, that's the extent of what I have.
No, that's all I have. I'm going to tell you an analysis I'm going to do, and I'm thinking about how to do it, and I'm not going to tell you because I'm going to have to iterate a while. I wanted to look at the home court versus away advantage of the teams. And we've talked about this, of the Jazz have this huge advantage. Denver has this huge advantage. I'm going to try to put it in stats and do that over the weekend. So we have something, like, I really want to look at that. And the reason I'm interested in looking at it is that I feel like some of the wins that we may have had this year and other years are due to our home court advantage and not anything, and not necessarily coaching or anything like that. So I'm very curious to see if I can come up with something to say, like, the biggest home court versus, advantages in the NBA. But I need to work on that and come up with, like, the way to evaluate that in the fairest way I can find. But that's something that's coming up.
Well, considering that other, several podcasts ago where I pointed out the differential in points for the Utah Jazz at home compared to road, and it's, something like 22, 23 points difference. I mean, it's a massive, and we know, I've always said the Utah Jazz job in terms of an NBA coach, it's like the best job in the league because you get tons of fan support and you can always win at home. It doesn't matter what you throw out on the court. You can win games in Salt Lake. That's the bottom line. I don't care who you throw out there. You have an opportunity to win every night. And I don't even care who's coaching. You still have an opportunity to win every night.
Yeah, Ty Corbin could be. And that's actually what I'm trying to prove. Because what I'm trying to show, and I'm not going to manipulate the stats. I'm not going to do David Locke, right? I'm not going to try to, like, take it and to figure my thesis. I'm actually going to see if the stats support that. Because I agree with you. I think that the Jazz team and coach does better because of our home court advantage. And I think that's consistently over the year. Like, if I look over to 10 years, my guess is it's going to be the Jazz or Denver. And honestly, I bet it's going to be the Jazz. But I don't know that. We'll look at the stats and try to figure that out.
All right. Well, we're going to call it a night. And for those watching on YouTube, please like, share, and subscribe. You can also follow us on X at Jazz Smack, and we will talk to everybody later.